7 years ago, I took a huge gamble on myself and I decided to leave my job to pursue my dream of becoming a full-time photographer. Over the years, I made many mistakes, but now that I'm on the other side, I see them as lessons learned. So here I am, sharing those lessons with everyone. Whether you're a hobbyist or a full-timer, there is always room to grow, and there is nothing wrong with making mistakes, only with not learning anything from them. My name is Regina, and this is the Probably Editing Podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Probably Editing Podcast. My name is Regina Blancas, and I have kind of a fun episode for y'all today. So it's October 2nd. It is actually my 31st birthday. I'm 31 years old, and I figured it'd be kind of fun for this episode for me to go over the entire timeline of every single camera that I've ever owned, ever in my 31 years of living so far. And there's a lot of them, okay? A lot of them that some of are film, some are like my newest, the one that I use now is like the newest Sony or whatever. And I wanted to just kind of go over like how I acquired them, what I used them for, where they got me to, what I know, what I remember knowing about them, and just kind of like going over them because when I pull them all out, I have all of them and I've never gotten rid of one ever. They're like my babies, you know, like to me, it's like these cameras help me grow my business, meet tons of people. And, you know, I get to do what I love as a job forever. And like, I don't want to get rid of them. So I still have them all. And it's just going to be interesting because it's changed a lot. Like the technology has changed a lot. And I don't know. I thought it'd be kind of a fun episode. So I have had a camera in my hand, as the cliche, it's going to sound like such a cliche, since I was a little kid. All right. So, my parents, I grew up kind of poor. And so, you know, we would get like, Christmas gifts and stuff like that. But I always knew and was aware of the fact that like to my parents, they worked really hard for me and my brother to have something under the Christmas tree, right? And we were really blessed with hardworking parents and stuff. And I do remember that my 6th or 7th Christmas, it was either for when I was 6 or when I was 7. I can't quite remember, but it's one of those two. We had like the best Christmas ever. Looking back on it now that I'm an adult, I'm like, my dad must have gotten like a huge bonus at his job or something, because I mean, that tree was stuffed. And that was the Christmas that I got my first camera. So my first camera is right here. It was actually an old Polaroid that still works. I still actually use it. I have like probably hundreds, if not thousands of Polaroid films. And if you're familiar with Polaroid, if I remember correctly, like I think it's Fujifilm or something that bought the company out. I probably should have looked that up, but the Polaroid company now is not the Polaroid company from when like I got this camera from the 90s. So like, for example, the biggest difference is in the quality. Like the Polaroid camera, like the Polaroid films or whatever they're called from back then, from when I was a kid that I would be shooting, you know, like my parents and my friends and stuff like that as a child. They are very sharp. They're very clear. They have a lot of good contrast. They're really just like satisfying to look at, and they've aged beautifully. There's, you know, of course there's some leaking from me over the years, maybe spilling water or condensation in the storage and stuff like that, but the quality is pretty pristine considering from how long back it was. The Polaroids now, unfortunately, they're never satisfying. You always kind of like, whenever I use it, I'll take it with me sometimes when I'm out walking my dogs or something like that, and you know, I want to snap a few photos of them just being themselves. They just don't look anywhere near as good as they used to. And it could be my camera. I mean, the camera is like super old, but it's just the Polaroid comes out looking real grainy and like cloudy and like unsaturated, and yeah, it's just not very satisfying. But it's really cool because it still works. This is the original Polaroid camera that I like. This is the first camera I ever got, and this is the original Polaroid from the 90s. So if it was when I was 6, it had to be like 1999. If it was when I was 7, it was the year 2000, which I think actually that is the year, because I remember we had like 2000 sunglasses in some photos. I think it was that one. Now that I remember, because I have some Polaroids with, it's actually the year 2000. So this is the year 2000 Polaroid. Still works, super awesome. I still bring it with me on all of my trips. I have a big camera bag that I can put like 5 or 6 cameras in, and this is always a go-to. The film is so pricey now, though, so it's kind of a splurge a bit. But I don't know. My hobby, my hobby is expensive, I guess, right? Like Polaroid and film. I love shooting in 120 film. Even 35 millimeter film, though, is expensive too, as well. So everything I like is just expensive, unfortunately. But yeah, so this is number 1. This is like baby Regina, 7 years old, first camera. Still love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so moving on. As I became a teenager, as I got older, my dad, even from when we were babies, had his own camera, and it was an old film 35 millimeter Canon. It's right here. It is super beat up. It's this guy. It's a 35 millimeter Canon Rebel K2. I'm assuming he just went to like Walmart and picked up a camera, but it takes beautiful photos. This right here is actually my go-to film camera. The photos are fantastic. They're clear. The colors are awesome. There's just good sharpness to it. It just looks good. It has that nice classic kind of film look in the images. And of course you can always buy the film to have the grain or whatever. But this is actually my go-to camera. I'm surprised it still works, because like, I don't know if you can hear it. There's something in there that's rattling. And this is one of those also that I put in my camera bag when I travel, and I take it with me everywhere. And I have thousands and thousands of films developed from this camera, and it's awesome. So this camera was my dad's. All right. I knew for sure growing up when I have photos of me as a baby that I know he took with this camera. And so as I got older, of course, he got older too. Like he kind of just left it behind, just kind of put it in a closet. And then when I was a little bit older, probably around 12, 13 years old, in one of those like spring cleaning sessions that my mom would have, she found it, and I was like, oh, can I borrow it? And she was like, yeah, because, I was still using my Polaroid, but I remember even as a kid, Polaroids, they were a little expensive. It's definitely like not something that we need. So it was like every now and then my parents would buy me Polaroids, but the film cameras are cheaper and they give you more exposures, or you can take more photos with them with the roll. Exposures are each photo that you can take in film, for those of you who aren't familiar with film. So it was a lot more attainable for me to use film. So I actually used this camera for many years after that. And I would just go around. By this point, we had like a dog. So I would take photos of my dog. I would take photos of my parents, of my brother, of my friends. When I would have like a little birthday party, like I would use it. When we went to zoos, like I used it for everything. And this camera, it did not leave auto. Like it was always on auto. I never messed with manual. I'm like a kid. So don't judge, but I think that's where I got the foundation of, even though I didn't know what composition was and what lighting was and, rule of thirds and all of that. Even though I didn't know what that was, I was practicing it without knowing what it was. And so I kind of built a good foundation there for years. And I developed a habit of carrying a camera around because of it, because it was a lot more easier for me to have film for it. It was also like the Polaroid. When you would take a photo, you now have this photo that you have to hold on to and be careful with until it's fully developed. And now I have this photo too. This, you just click it and it's done, So it was this right here. The Polaroid was my first exposure to cameras. This was where I gained my experience from, even as a kid. I mean, as much experience as you can get as a child, right? But like it broke the ice for me and camera, it broke the ice between me and photography for sure. So now this camera actually remained a go-to for me till I was about 15 years old. Yeah, 15 years old. When I was a sophomore in high school, by this time I've been messing with this camera for years. I have like a ton of film, like developed film from it and stuff like that. And, I'm in high school. I'm like a sophomore, and I take some prints to school with me to show my friends. And I went to a school here in Austin called McCallum High School that offers a fine arts program. So think of it kind of like college, where you can apply to be in like a fine arts field, right? And so you can apply to be at McCallum, like a music major, an art major, theater major. I can't remember what the other ones are, but there's several like majors that you can have within high school. And it was amazing. Like, it was incredible. And I applied to be an art major. And so you had an audition as a middle school 8th grader. You audition, and like for my audition, we had to draw our hand in whatever form we want to. And I remember I just kind of did one of these things and like drew it on a piece of paper, and I got accepted into this program. And so it was really, really, really cool because they had all sorts of art classes, like ceramics and pottery and painting and just printmaking. I mean, everything and anything. And it was photography, and it was awesome. And that's how I discovered the world of photography. But I applied and was in the art program. So one day, going back to my friends and stuff, I took to school a bunch of developed prints of some just random things that I took throughout my house. It was literally photos of like my dog and like toothpaste and candles and stuff like that. And so I'm showing my friends, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool." And they were in black and white. And all of a sudden, like, my art teacher, when you're doing your work, she walks around and they just kind of critiques your work, gives you feedback and stuff like that. And in one of those, she saw my prints, and she was like, "Oh, can I look at these?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so she looked at them. She was like, "Hey, these are, do you like photography? These are pretty good." And I was like, "Yeah, I just kind of do it here and there." She was like, "Did you know that we have a photography program?" And I did not know we had a photography program. Like, I really didn't know. And I was like, "Oh, no, I didn't know that." And she was like, "Would you be interested in it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so she takes me like right there and then to the photography teacher, which was like right next door. So I'm like, I really don't know how I didn't know. And she introduces me to her, and the photography teacher's like, "Yeah, you are welcome to join my photography class next semester." She was like, "But do you only have a film camera?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "We use a DSLR camera. You have to have a DSLR camera. We don't have film and none of that." And it sucks because if I remember correctly, I think she had told me that at that point, so this is like 2009 or 8 or 9, she let me know that a few years prior to that, they did have like a black room, I think is what it's called, to develop the film and stuff like that. And they didn't have that anymore. I would have loved to learn how to develop my own film. Even to this day, I wish there was somewhere I could go to learn how to develop my own film. But anyways, she was like, "You need a DSLR camera." I didn't know what that was. And I was like, "Okay." And so I was like, "Okay, cool." So I was like, "All right, well, there goes that." And so I go home, and I kind of think about it. And then I tell my mom, I'm like, "Mom, I'm really interested in taking this photography class, but we have to have something called a DSLR camera." She's like, "What is that?" And my parents are first generation Mexican Americans. So they immigrated here during the Reagan years. They got their citizenship and everything, but they're first gen. So they're first gen, and I'm first gen child. So this whole world is new. Much more new is the whole DSLR thing. She's like, "What?" So I kind of explained to her, it's like a digital camera, I think, whatever. So shortly after that, we go to Best Buy, because Best Buy was the place. We didn't know about like camera specific shops. We just went to Best Buy. And when we go to Best Buy, the guy explains to me like, "Oh, yeah. We have this camera." And it was a Sony Alpha something. Couldn't tell you what it was. And he was like, "This is it, blah, blah, blah." And it was like $600 and something, which back then that was way too much money that my mom could afford. And so she was like, "Mija, like, you're going to have to wait. I'm going to have to save up for this. Like, you're going to have to wait." And I was like, "Okay, I understand." And so I remember my mom taking in a couple extra hours a week at work and stuff like that here and there. And she saved up for a whole semester. She didn't save the whole amount, but she saved part of it. And she was able, we went back to get my camera before school started up for the next semester. I signed up for a class, for the photography class. We went back to Best Buy and she applied for a credit card, got approved, put in most of the amount down, and then the rest was just put on the credit card because I also needed like the memory cards and all that stuff, right? The photography like case for the camera and stuff like that. Like all that is extra. So, but she got it. She got it for me. Very like memory. It's just so cool. Like my mom is such a badass. And so yeah, my first camera ever going in next is the Sony Alpha 200. Okay. I don't remember who it was and I don't care too much, but I just want to say this. One time I made a post on Instagram. I commented under somebody's post about how my first camera was from like 2008 or 9 and how it was a Sony Alpha camera. And somebody like tried to drag me through the comments about how that's impossible, that Sony didn't even have their DSLR cameras back then, blah, blah, blah. And he was just like bullying me hardcore on this comment thread to the point where like other guys commented on my behalf and were like, dude, you're being an asshole. Like, what are you doing? Like, yes, they did. Just a random thought that came back. But here it is. Like, it was a thing. So this camera came out in February of 2008. I looked it up. It is the Sony Alpha 2000, and I still have my like old school tile. I when I pulled it out of my case, I was like, oh, I wonder if it still works. But here it is. This was the first legit camera that I ever got, the Sony DSLR, that I needed for my photography class. Wait, no, this is the Alpha 33. Sorry, it was this one. It was this one. This is the Sony Alpha 200. They look the same. So this big giant brick, this was my camera. And I only had one lens, which was the kit lens. I should have charged them, but I don't even know if I have the battery, but it has like the LCD screen. I don't actually believe it shows you the photos, actually. I think it just shows you the settings. And yeah, this is the lens that it came with. This was it. This right here is responsible for everything, the foundation of everything I know now. How I edit, how I shoot, how the settings that I have, everything that I do now came from this camera and what I learned in my photography class in high school all those years ago. This right here is who I have to thank. My mom, who I have to thank, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to join this photography class. And who knows, maybe I would have just never gotten into photography. Who knows what my life would have been like. I owe a lot to that moment. I owe a lot to my art teacher who saw my prints, who connected me with a photography teacher. When I look back on these memories, I'm like, man, so the trajectory of my life would have been so different had I not had those moments. All right. And so this camera, like, I'm never getting rid of any of these cameras. This is my life right here. This is the lens. This is the camera, I mean. And so in this photography class, I took it for about 2 years. So from, my sophomore year, junior year, senior year. And I learned everything. So, we would have projects where we had to do, for example, like, okay, like, this is an example, like for this project, the homework was to create photos that were, I don't know, a good example of like, I don't know, like bird's eye view or, rule of thirds and stuff like that, like things like that. Okay. Like high school photography courses. What I really enjoyed, I couldn't give you an exact answer why, but for whatever reason, I really enjoyed shooting with larger groups of people. All right. So most of my projects involved 2+ people. Most of the time we're like 5 or 6. Okay. And I would go all out for my projects. I would come up with a concept and try to like go off of that. So for example, back in the day, I used to be obsessed with a fashion photographer named Mario Testino. And I mean obsessed. Like, I emailed him several times, like, please, will you critique my work? Like, like, I was like weird. I was obsessed with his work to the point where I could be, browsing through a magazine and I'd be like, that's him, that's Mario Testino. And then I would look and bam, it would be Mario Testino. Like, I was obsessed with him. And so, one of the projects, for example, that I can think of was I was really into the whole Calvin Klein concept of like white t-shirt and jeans, kind of like shaggy people, a beat up old truck in like the middle of a dirt road kind of thing. Like, I was like super into that concept for a little bit. And so for one of my projects, I just reached out to random kids from my high school. I was not in any way whatsoever a very well-known person in my high school. Like, I was like one of those people that you could have been missing all month and like nobody noticed, other than the 3 or 4 people that I talked to in school. But I don't know where this confidence would come from, but I would reach out to these people on Facebook back in the early stages of Facebook. And they wouldn't even be like my friends on Facebook, but I would message them and be like, hey, like, I want to do this. I have this idea for this photo shoot for my photography class. Would you be interested? And they would always say yes. 100% of the times they always said yes, which still blows my mind. And so that's how I kind of got started. So I would organize these huge shoots with people that I didn't even know. I would guide them through the poses. That's where I learned my foundation of guiding people through poses. These are high school kids. At the time, I was also a high school kid, but like, high school kids do not, they might like photos now, but back in the day, like, we did not like getting our photos taken. Okay. Like, we were using like the cyber shot cameras, like none of that was very like, common for us to do. And so here I was guiding these high school students through a whole like 3 or 4 hour photo shoot. Like, I honestly cannot believe how many times I did this and how many people were like wanting to be a part of it. I eventually got to the point where people were like, hey, if you ever need another model, like, let me know. Be like, okay. And like, obviously in exchange, I would give them their photos back. But that's how I practiced posing my clients, how to build confidence in people, how to create a like safe and fun and comfortable environment for multiple people. I just really, looking back on it, like, that is where I learned all of that I do now. And it just got better and better over the years, and it will continue to get better. But this camera right here is what led me to that. And the photos that it would take, honestly, I'm not a very techie person. I'm really not. Like, what I am telling you guys is literally the story of my photography journey. At no point did I take like college level photography courses or anything like that. Like, this was very much like learn as I went kind of thing. I love the cameras that I use now, like my new Sony A7R4 and all that. But to this day, the photos that DSLR camera got me, oh man, like, I will definitely make a post about it later on this week about like with the photos, because I still have the files. There was so much depth to the images. Like, it was like 3D almost. It was so creamy and crisp. I've always enjoyed a sharp, crispy photo. I don't like blur. I think I've mentioned that before, unless it's intentional. But I love a crispy image. And that camera right there, like the crispiest of crispiest. But yeah, so that camera lasted me, I want to say, until I was about, I don't know, 19 years old. That was it for a long, long time. Now, the Sony A33, the one that I first thought was the Sony A200, I can't 100% remember where I got it from or when I got it. It came out, it said, in 2010, which is a year before my senior year. I want to say that my dad gifted it to me shortly after I graduated high school, or maybe even right before. So I must have gone in early 2011 or just after 2012. And there's no big story to this one. I think it's just like, from what I remember in my memory, like, it's just like an upgraded version, of course, of like the other one that I have. I don't have any profound memories attached to it other than I know I took it to Mexico with me. You know what? This one, I believe this is a mirrorless camera because this one does show you the photos on the back of the screen. So yeah, I think this was a camera that I got right before I graduated. So I graduated summer of 2011. So this must have been one that I got like that January, something like that. It must have been like a Christmas gift. Great camera. Like the A200, also fantastic photos. I just don't have like a big, profound like thing to talk about with this one other than like it was an upgraded version of it. I'm pretty sure my dad got it for me, and yeah, this was the next thing. By this point I'm like 18 or 19 years old with this guy. Okay, so 18 or 19 years old, I graduate high school. I go to college. Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. When I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to go to art school because I loved the art world of my high school classes and stuff like that. However, I'm not a studious person. So while my art classes and everything got all of my attention and effort, math, in particular math, I was not good at, and I'm still not good at. I was that senior who was redoing freshman courses as a senior. So as a senior, I was in the freshman like algebra class and the freshman chemistry class because I failed them so many times, and I almost actually didn't graduate. I was not a very good high school student. I skipped a lot. One of my best friends had a truck, and we just skipped a lot, like just simply put. And my my counselor, you know, your second semester in your junior year would sit every senior or junior down and tell them like, okay, like next year you're going to have like all these off periods because you did so good your rest of the years, you know, blah, blah, blah. They kind of prepare you for what your senior year is going to look like, ask you what college plans you have, etc., so they can start helping you out. Well, when it was my turn to talk to my counselor, Miss Facundo, I remember very clearly, she kind of just looked at me and was like, you're not going to graduate if you keep up what you're doing. And I was like, what? And she was like, do you know how often you're missing classes? Like, you have to be aware of how often you've skipped school now, right? And I was like, I mean, yeah. And she was like, you've failed multiple classes. You're not turning in your work. Like, what's going on? And it was the first, I was aware, like I wasn't naive to the fact that I was skipping classes, not doing my homework, not studying for tests, like blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of like bam, had like a wake up call of like, oh my God, I'm going to be here again after senior year. It's going to be so embarrassing because I was slacking off now. That was my wake up call. And so instead of being like the other seniors in my high school who had maybe 3 or 4 classes all day because they did so well in all their other years, I was the opposite. I was the senior who had to take a class before school. I had to have a fully loaded schedule, and then I had to do something after school. Because by the time my senior year started, I needed 3 PE credits, and I took 0. So I had to do stuff before school and after school to make up for that. So I had to join track. I had to join a sport that was after or before school. And to me, I tried out for everything. I tried out for like the dance team, and that was such a fail. I tried out for the softball team. Everybody, like all these girls were like, oh yeah, no, like we pretty much take on anyone. Like you just have to be, you know, willing to learn, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about softball. They're like, yeah, just come, like you'll get in. No, I did not get in at all. Did not get in, like didn't hit the ball, didn't catch the ball, but I ran fast. So I joined track. I was forced to join a sport. So I joined track for the next 2 years and a semester. And that's how I got my PE credit. And all that to say that I was not very good at the like academic part of it, the history, the math, the science. I'm not good at it. Okay. But all my art stuff was very good. And so when I applied to art schools, I would have to audition, and I got accepted. And so one of the schools, I had a school reach out to me, and it was University of Art and Design at Santa Fe, Santa Fe University of Art and Design, something like that. It was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they offered me a really, really big scholarship. This is probably, I don't have many what is it called? Regrets in my life so far. I'm 31. I don't have many regrets, but this is the number one regret I have in my life so far. This university offered me almost 3/4 of my school to be paid off. Okay. And please, when I tell you this story, I ask for no judgment, although I understand if you do, and just know that I am not like that anymore. I have matured a lot. I promise you. When I look back on it, I'm like, God, I wish I could beat my own self up. And it is, like I said, one of the very, very few, very big regrets that I have in my life so far. So this school reached out to me. I auditioned for it, everything, and I got in, and they offered me like 3/4 of my school to be paid off by them, like in scholarship. Like it was going to be covered through a scholarship through them. We went as a family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and my dog. Like we packed up, we rented a van, they rented a van, and we drove to Santa Fe, New Mexico, visited with my like counselor from over there, my advisor from over there. We walked the campus. It was a dream, like it was beautiful. There was like art studios everywhere. Like it was just such a dream. I loved it and everything. It was perfect. But I was 17 years old. I graduated a year early because when I was younger, I skipped kindergarten. I was 17 years old. Okay, this is the part where I'm going to ask you to please not judge me so harshly. I was 17 years old. All my friends were already 18. All right, some of them were 19. I was the one in my friend groups who was still not able to go out and do the whole clubbing thing with them. Right? That was the thing you did when you're 18. You can't drink yet, but you can go club. And so in my stupid 17-year-old brain, when we went to visit the school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I loved the school. And we even picked out my dorm that day. Like everything was good to go. I signed up for my classes. I signed up for my dorm. I mean, everything was lined up, good to go. But what happened is that after visiting the school, you're hungry. So we were like, let's go out to eat. And we went to downtown Santa Fe. This is in 2011. We went to what's like downtown Santa Fe. And I remember being like, man, everyone here is so old. Like, and I don't mean that like sarcastically. Like I remember even my parents were like, yeah, it is kind of an older crowd. Everywhere we went, it was like older people, like retired people, couples and stuff like that. And I remember the part of downtown Santa Fe that we went to, there was like no clubs, there was no nightlife. It was just like little jewelry stores, like just like random little places like that. And we couldn't find a restaurant to go eat because they were closing. Like it was like 6 p.m. and they were closing. And I was like, what the heck? Like we were all kind of like, what? And so we ended up having to go to the store and buy like ham and cheese and bread to make sandwiches. And that hit me like a shock. I was like, oh my God, I'm 17 years old. I'm about to move to this state with no one, because my parents, like I said earlier, were the only ones are the first and the only ones in both sets of their entire families to immigrate to the United States. I live here in this country. I am born and raised an American, but I live here with no family. It's just my mom, my dad, my brother, and I. That's it. I have no family. So 17-year-old me was like, I'm about to move as a 17-year-old to this state with no one with me. I'm going to leave the 3 people that I have in this country behind, come to this state that I know nothing about. And from the looks of it, it's just a bunch of old people and there's no nightlife. And so then what? When I'm 18, I didn't go out with my friends back home because I was still 17. But then when I turn 18, I'm going to come here and I can't go out because I don't know anybody. And there is like no nightlife. And I know that sounds so immature and crazy, but that's how my brain thought back then. So we go back home. And basically, like within a couple days, I send my advisor an email and just being like, I can't do this. And I basically like rejected my scholarship. And I think if I remember correctly, they tried to even offer me like something else. And like, I was just like, no. And that is my biggest regret in life so far. I would have met friends. I think like I would have met people. And I love my parents. I love them, but my parents unfortunately have always been the kind of parents that love me so much. They will just be like, instead of being like, Regina, you've committed to this, you have to do it. It's going to be better for you. It's going to be good. You're going to be okay. They were like, okay, if you don't want to do this, it's okay. And I love them for it so much because I know it comes from a place of love, but I know now that when I become a parent one day, I'm not going to do that. Maybe as much because I needed that push. I needed that push to try something new, to know that, hey, they're going to be fine. I can always come visit, or they can always come visit. New Mexico really isn't that far. You're going to get to learn a whole new world. You're going to be submerged in this world that you love. But instead, I was like, there's no nightlife. There's no clubs. Blah, 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 blah. And so I just rejected this offer. And yeah, so I threw that away. I threw it away. And I stayed in Austin, Texas. And I went to a community college here, which is great. I still did some art stuff. I was like, I don't know what to do now. You know, what do I do? And so I just kind of took random, what are they called? Like the main courses that you have to take no matter what. So like math and history and stuff. Barely passed a couple of them. But I still kept myself in like photography and ceramics and just art classes in general. I just really needed to be taking art classes. Like that was like my life. But then I stopped because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to stop going to school. And so for about a year and a half or two, so I graduated when I was 17, up until I was about 20 years old, I just kind of worked and took a couple courses here and there and just kind of try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Completely dropped photography, completely stopped working with my cameras, picking them up. They just stayed in their case for those 3 years almost. And yeah. So now I turned 21, and I get this itch to go back to school. And so I'm like, where do I want to go? And so I looked up a school that's very close here to Austin. It's called Texas State University. Texas State University is a school that I owe a lot to as well. So I'm 21. I discovered the world of Texas State, and they have a program called Communication Design, which when I wanted to apply, it had just started up. And it was like basically like graphic design, but blended with like advertising and marketing. It was a really cool. So it was like, I knew I didn't want to just take graphic design. It was like graphic design with a useful, like more, you could use it in a more wider variety of job applications kind of degree. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Marketing and advertising with graphic design. Heck yeah, let's do it. So I go to Texas State. I'm going in there with a very low GPA as it is, but I'm able to get some classes covered through, scholarships and stuff like that. And I take a couple courses. Don't do very good at the history and math. There's a theme here, but nail my art, like drawing and stuff like that courses. Like, oh, I did really good at those. And at the time, I was like, you know what? I need to pick up my camera. Like, I have cameras. And so I come back to my A33, my Sony A33. And I just kind of post on my Facebook. I'm like, hey, y'all, like, I'm trying to practice my photography again. If you need any photography, just let me know. And I got like a couple of hits, right? I got like some old high school friends who were like, oh yeah, I'm getting engaged. I need some engagement photos. Or like, oh, are we having a baby? We need some baby photos or whatever. Just random things here and there. And so I was able to practice back with that. And so I did that for about a year until I was 22. So when I was at Texas State, I joined a sorority. And in that sorority, really exploded my photography business. So up until that point, my photography was just kind of like a side gig. And I had a full-time job, and it was just kind of like a thing that I did on the side for like, rent money or grocery money. So it was like a super broke college kid, like super broke. And so when I joined this sorority, because I had already been practicing with like random people on Facebook, my photography, when I got into my sorority, I was like, hey, like if you guys ever need photos, I can take your senior portraits or something like that. That's how I got into the world of senior portraits, is because when I went to Texas State, at the end of every semester, I would see like hundreds of seniors getting their pictures taken. And I was like, huh. And so, when I was in my sorority, a couple of my sorority sisters were like, hey, can you take my senior pictures? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I would charge them like peanuts. Like, I think it was like $50, which is fine because it was just like for exposure and practice, honestly, on my end. But that's how I started getting more and more exposure to other people that were outside of my immediate Facebook friends on Facebook. Because a sorority is a fantastic way to network. I didn't join it with the purpose of networking. It just happened. But there's like hundreds of sororities. Well, let's say this. There's like dozens of sororities on your campus, and they're all kind of connected. Like they all kind of know each other, right? But then there's like other universities where they all know each other too because they're in the same sorority, just at different campuses, okay? So they had each other on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. It was like fantastic networking. So me taking photos of one of my sorority sisters and them tagging me exposed me to all of those people's friends. And little by little, over the next year when I was 22, so this is now, 2016? I'm getting people outside of my friend group asking me to take their pictures. And I've now built a great foundation from when I was a kid to when I was in high school to what I did with Facebook friends to that point. So it got to the point where I was like, I need a new camera. Like I need something more updated. Cause at this point, my Sony A33 is like over 10 years old. I'm like, I need a new camera. And so my dad helped me out at that time. He said he'll pay for it and then I pay him back because we got like a credit. I don't know, the whole thing. But we come now to the next camera in my setup or in my timeline of cameras. The next camera was the Sony a6000. This right here, this is what grew my business. Every single time I have a photographer who's just getting into photography that wants to grow a business or just wants to get better at it, when they come up to me in person or on social media and they're like, hey, what camera do you have, Regina? I want to buy what you have. I want to get into photography. I tell them, you do not need to get the camera that I have right now. This is what I started my business with. This camera got me through the next 3 years of my photography business. This is responsible for hundreds of senior portraits, of weddings. Okay, this camera right here. All right. This camera I got, 2016? I think it was. Yeah, 2006. Yeah, 2016. Okay. This is where I learned how to shoot This is where I learned how to shoot manual, like for real. This right here is where I learned the world of manual photography. This is where I learned the importance of lenses. Okay, the lenses, you can have a maybe not so great camera body, but if your lens is good, you got it. This is where I learned how to, everything that I know now, setting wise, how I shoot wise, forget the posing and stuff like that, because that only just got better with time. I'm talking about the technicalities, the technical parts of photography. This is the camera that I got. And it drives me nuts when people want to know what camera I shoot with so that they can go buy it. You don't need to buy a $3,000-$4,000 camera if you don't know how to use a $500 camera. Whatever camera you have, especially if you bought it in the last 3 or 4 years, is good enough to get started because the technology is just that good. Okay, if we were back in 2011 when you're shooting with this, yeah, maybe at that point the statement I just made wouldn't apply. But right now in 2024, any camera that you buy between, I would even say 2018 moving forward, is perfectly fine for you to get started. Okay, you can get started with that. You should master whatever camera you have, and until you have exhausted its use and the tools that it comes with and you find yourself needing more, then you will know that you need a new camera. I had to get a new camera because this camera, the Sony A33, was not shooting as fast as I needed it to. Okay, with senior portrait photography, there are moments where you need a fast shutter speed, a really fast shutter speed. Moments like when they're tossing their cap in the air, when they're popping a champagne bottle, when they're throwing confetti in the air, when they're throwing papers in the air, when maybe they're jumping in the air. Because a lot of them at Texas State University, there's a tradition where you jump in the river. There's a river that runs to the school, and so at Texas State, their tradition when they graduate is to themselves jump into the river. And a lot of times I would take those photos and they would come out blurry, just a little too blurry with the correct shutter speed. It was just not fast enough. So I was like, you know what? I need a new camera. And that's when I got this. This little thing is fast. Is really fast. I was going to say a bad word, but I'm going to try not to in this podcast. This little thing is so fast, okay? And so that's why I reached out to it. It also was cool that I could flip the screen a bit at the time. It was really compact. This is a mirrorless camera. Like, there's a lot of things about this that sold me on it, but it was really mostly just the fact that I needed to go from something that was newer at the time, okay? So you don't need to get a $4,000 camera and then a $1,500 lens for you to get good at photography. You need to get good at photography, whatever you have, exhaust its abilities, and then you'll know, okay, I need a new camera, all right? But this camera it lasted me until like 2020, okay? And it shot through a couple weddings. There was a time where I thought I wanted to get into weddings, and I'm going to make a whole episode about my very brief wedding photography moments, because like I said, that my denial of going to School of the Art in New Mexico was one of the few regrets that I have. When I did weddings, I made a lot of mistakes with those weddings, and they are on the almost to the top of regrets that I have in life so far. So we'll do a whole podcast episode about that. But I dabbled with all the genres of photography with this one until I was like, you know what? I love senior portraits. All right. If you remember back in high school, I was organizing groups of high school kids and just doing concepts based off of fashion photography pieces that I would see in magazines and stuff. I really discovered that I like blending senior portraits with fashion photography, and that I like doing it with that demographic of person, seniors in high school or college. All right. For a lot of reasons. I like it's an age group that can have fun with their attire. It's an age group where it makes sense to be a little bit more fun. It makes sense to kind of blend a more sultry kind of look with graduation. I love shooting at the architecture of universities. The list goes on. I love the world of senior portrait photography blended with fashion photography. It's something that I've done since I was in high school and that I like to do now. So this camera is what really made me discover my business side of photography. This camera is responsible for shooting good looking images that led to more and more and more exposure, to the point where I was like, had a legit like mini job out of it. Like, I think I hit my first like 33K year with photography, because I sort of had a full-time job at a grocery store. So I was like, when I was like younger, I was like really comfy because of it. And yeah, I got to learn different lenses. It's just this right here, my Sony a6000. Funny enough, I wish it still worked. It does work, but I am not very bright sometimes. So I can't remember what I did, but the LCD on my camera wouldn't work. You could still see the viewfinder. It took photos. Everything worked. It's just that the LCD screen stopped working one day. When I took it to the camera shop, they're like, you're going to have to send it in to Sony. And honestly, it's not worth it, because it's going to cost almost the same as the camera to replace it. I was like, okay. Everything worked though, except the LCD screen. However, one day, Regina, I don't know why, was messing with the settings, and I ran into an option. Like an idiot, I ran into an option on the camera that asked me if I wanted to be able to view the settings and everything only through the LCD screen, only through the viewfinder, or both. It was set to both. And so even though the LCD screen did not work, because it was set to both, I could see everything through the viewfinder. But what does Regina do? She sets it to only LCD screen, like an idiot. Thinking, like an idiot, oh, if I switch it to LCD screen only, maybe it'll work. And then guess what? It all went blank because now I can't see nothing. I can't see anything because I set it to just be from the LCD screen, even though the LCD screen doesn't work. And it's such a shame because I really miss such a small, compact, but very good quality camera. I do a lot of fishing, and there's a lot of times where I see a beautiful like bird or, turtle or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I want to take a picture of it. And I try doing it on my phone, and it's like just not the same. But I don't want to take my nice fancy camera. I would love to take this one, but it doesn't work. So I don't know. Maybe one day I'll bite the bullet and send it over to the Sony company to fix it for me because I do have such cherished memories with it. And it's available really cheaply on Facebook and stuff, but it's just, I want this one. But yeah, anyways, that is the story of my Sony Alpha 6000. At this point in my timeline, I am 21. I'm between 21 and 23. 23 is when I decided to drop out of college because I didn't know what I was doing, and I just racking up debt for not knowing what I was doing. And at 23, all these years, for the past 7 years, I was working in a company, a fantastic company here in Texas called H-E-B. It's our local grocery store. In this company, I was moving up. I really wanted to move up, and I was just taking courses through the H-E-B that they offer to, move into a management position, blah, 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 blah. But I was in a fork road. I could either continue that trajectory and like move up in the company, or my photography business was really taking off. I had consistent clients. I could pretty much know that I could expect a certain amount of bookings to occur every year now. It was growing, and I was in a fork road. I was like, do I make this my life with the grocery store and just, that's it? This is the safest option. I'm good. Or do I gamble on myself and just try making photography my career? I love it. It makes me so happy. Whenever I would meet people and they would ask me what I did for a living, I wanted so badly to tell them that I was a photographer, but I felt like an imposter because I wasn't really, because it wasn't my full-time job. I think that's so silly. Don't ever think that you can only consider yourself a photographer if it's your full-time job. False. Okay? No, that is not what creates the ability for you to call yourself that. You're a photographer if you love photography and you practice photography. I don't know. I'm sure there's a more prettier sounding answer, but to me, if you love photography and you like shooting, you're a photographer. Okay, but I felt like an imposter saying that. So I would be like, oh, I work at a grocery store, and then I would feel like really crappy saying that because it's like, oh, I work at a grocery store. But so anyways, I was like at a fork road of like, do I gamble on myself or do I just go the safe path? And at the time I was 23 and I was like, okay, well, I don't have kids. I don't have like a house. Okay. Like if I fail at this, I'm 24, 25. I'm still super young. Like if I'm going to fail, let's fail now that we don't have any major responsibilities or kids depending on us or anything like that. So I put my 2 weeks in and left my job and moved out of San Marcos, moved back home with my mom and my brother. My mom and my brother lived at the house by themselves. And so my mom and my brother lived by themselves. And so I moved back in with them. And yeah, I gambled on myself. I gave it everything that I had. I hired a business coach who was with me for like a year. My business coach really helped me with my mindset and just, more of like the business aspect of it, because I learned that, being a photographer isn't the most important part about having a photography business. You have to also know what you're doing as a business owner, because you're business owner first, photographer second. Otherwise, you're going to fail. And that's going to be another podcast because I made a lot of mistakes considering myself a photographer first and then a business person second. Lots of costly mistakes with that one. But anyways, we learned from them. But so at this point, I'm like full on photography. I'm learning the world of marketing. I'm learning the world of social media, advertising, just everything. I'm like knee deep in it. I'm like really being, intentional with what I'm putting out there. And so I kept using this camera for a while, for a long, long time, until we get to what I use now. So I used this camera for a long time until I bought the Sony A7 3. I think it was the third one. I'm like 99% sure it was the third one. I bought the Sony a7 III with my own money. It was really expensive, and it did not have a kit lens. I bought the Sony a7 III, not the R3, just the 3. And then I also bought the 85 millimeter 1.4 G Master lens. The G Master line with Sony is so expensive, but it's so worth it. So I had the a7 III, the a7 III with a G Master 85 millimeter 1.4 lens, and then I also bought the Tamron 728 to 75 millimeter lens, 2.8, something like that. That trio was and is honestly the only things that I use. Okay, the Sony a7 III with the GM lenses are so good. My photography business really took on from that. My photos really took off from that. The quality that setup has is just like was way more advanced than what I was doing. Not that this wasn't good. It's just, again, you hit the point where you're like, I need more. I was shooting in all the right settings, but I wasn't getting the look in the photos that I wanted. It was simply because of the quality of the lenses and because I was shooting with like a 3.5 instead of like a 1.4. When I first shot with that 1.4 85, like I was like blown away. I was like, this is my photo? It's like, yeah, you can finally, I was like, why can't I make the issue that I was having was like, I went to the camera store and I was like, why are my backgrounds not as blurry as I see other people do? And they were like, well, because you're shooting with a 3.5, you need something smaller than that. They're like, you need a 1.4. And I was like, what? And I was like, but I'm shooting it at the smallest. And they were like, yeah, but there's lenses that are even smaller. And so they put on a 1.4 and I was like, whoa. And I was like, I want that. And so it was like a $4,000 purchase for everything altogether, but I did it and saved up for it, and I did it and I bought it, and that just kind of like really propelled me into the next level of everything. It's just kind of like I really became like I kind of really established my identity within photography, like as far as what my editing style is, my shooting style is, what just everything that I do now was really, 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 really cemented with that. And I kept that camera for a while. Until just last year, I bought the Sony a7 IV. This is now what I use on everything that you see now. And I still have my Sony 85 1.4 G Master lens. It is my bread and butter lens. I love it. Well, I can't imagine ever getting sick of it. And I had another lens until it got stolen, but then I replaced it with this one. This is the Sigma 35 millimeter 1.4 lens. And that is it. Those are the only two lenses that I use along the way between the Sony a7 III. So between 2020 and 2021, I taught myself how to use off-camera flash. So then I also bought, my Godox trigger, the Godox lights, the light stand, the umbrellas, everything. I had raised my prices with my photography business. I now had a CPA. I knew that, what I had to charge so that I can pay myself, pay my taxes, and still have profit left over. Like everything became more officially a business around 2019 and forward. Like we have an LLC now, we have an accountant now, like we have a bookkeeper, like it's a legit business now. Lots of mistakes and learning along the way, but we are legit, like all that now. And so yeah, this is the camera that I use for everything right here. Sony a7 IV. Not the R4, I just went for the 4. It's honestly more than enough than what I need. I have my 2 lenses, I have my off-camera flash, my backpack, and that is pretty much it. But after hearing this episode, you can see how over really my whole life, I had been practicing everything that makes my photography mine. How I compose my photos, how I like to light my photos, how I like to shoot, how I like my photos to look, how I like to, guide and pose my clients through their poses, how I like to direct my photo shoots, how I like to work with the clients, how I like to everything. Every single aspect of my photography had been developed starting from this guy right here, this giant brick. It's actually funny because this one and this one are almost, I want to say almost the same size. This one is like a feather compared to this one. This one is like heavy. This one is like not that heavy. But I owe a lot to these two cameras right here. This one made me realize how much I loved photography. It opened me up to working with kids in my high school. It's what made me connect with kids in my high school to direct whole photo shoots for my photography class projects. It is what opened me up to being aware of like rule of thirds and compositions and lighting and stuff like that. And this one is what just really brought all of the photos that I had in my mind to life, because it has everything that it needs for that to happen. It has all the tools necessary to bring all the ideas that I have in my life to life, in my brain to life. And that is my journey. That is my story. That is everything between the ages of 7 we established to 31. So whatever that is, I don't know math, and we established that too. So y'all do the math on that one. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been fun. I am never getting rid of these cameras ever. If anything, seeing them all laid out kind of like, I don't know, kind of made me a little bit emotional for a second there, because I'm like, man, this is my history. This is my history from the very first one being my Polaroid camera. I mean, imagine like a 7-year-old Regina, like 7-year-old Regina probably never thought we would be making a podcast. Like it would lead from this to this one day. Like, and who knows what comes afterwards? Like, I don't know. It's just crazy, and it's fun, and it's, I don't know, lights a fire under my butt. But yeah, and then I do also have like my other like my hobby cameras that I shoot with for fun. So we'll talk about that more some other time. But I do also have some 120 and 35 millimeter vintage cameras that do work. Some of them need some work, but they do work. My favorite type of film is 120. I love it. And I have like 40 rolls of film that I need to get developed, but I haven't done it because that's going to be like $2,000 to get developed and printed. So I'm like, we're going to wait a little bit for that one. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the timeline and history of all the cameras that I've ever worked with from the very beginning to what I shoot with now daily. And I hope that it shows you that I really hope if there's one thing that I could get through to everyone is that you do not need to go out and get yourself into debt to learn photography. Whatever camera you have now, especially like I said, if it's a camera from less than 5 years ago, you have everything you need. The technology nowadays is just way too good for you to be so like nitpicky about it. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The technology nowadays is so good, you don't need the newest thing because it's just that good. People like me who are more aware of what we're doing and what we're needing are going to be more nitpicky because we are aware of what we need every single time that we're shooting. So for example, there is a camera that is better, you could say, than what I have, the Sony a7 IV. There is also the Sony a9. I don't need the Sony a9 because the Sony a9 is known for its extremely fast shutter speeds, okay? And it's extremely, like, just its speed for everything. The people who use that are people who are shooting sports, race cars, things like that. Like I said earlier, I needed something faster than this one, my Sony a6000, because I was shooting with, like, seniors who are, like, popping champagne bottles or tossing their cap in the air or something like that. I don't need a race car speed camera for that. I just needed something faster. So we went from this one to the Sony a7 III. But at that point also I was like, all right, I need something newer too. You don't need the newest thing. Just master whatever camera you have. And if you hear that and part of you is like, oh no, like I want to get the newest thing. You know what? If you can afford it, if you're not going to get yourself in debt, then who am I to tell you not to, right? But I can guarantee you that when you have your new fancy camera and if you still don't know how to use it, if you still don't know 100% how to shoot in manual, you are just wasting your own money because it makes no sense to get a new camera if you don't know how to use it. Master the camera that you have now and then get yourself a new one. And you will know when you need a new one when you've outgrown it. Okay? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I'm excited to see what 31 has in store for me. Yesterday that I went fishing, yesterday that I went fishing, I caught my biggest bass yet. So I'll take that as a sign that 31 is going to be a really good year. 2024 has been a really good year so far. And I can't wait to make my, end of the year recap video. But for now, like I've stated before, if you guys have any questions, if there's anything that you would like for me to talk about on the podcast, please send me an email at probablyediting@gmail.com, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Probably Editing Podcast. It would mean the world to me if you would rate this on iTunes and Spotify. If you would like to view these episodes in a video format instead, then I am also on YouTube. And as always, if you would like to stay up to date and be notified of when I upload new episodes, just hit the little bell icon and you'll be known as soon as I upload them. If you have any questions or want to hear about something specific in the next episode, send me an email at probablyeditingpodcast@gmail.com. I'll see you in the next one.